Welcome to the Conversations Across the Grand Canyon podcast, aka The Big Gap. Here, our purpose will be to explore the impacts of social, political, and economic issues through the lens of generational and cultural differences. Good day, listeners. This episode of the Big Gap podcast, I want to extend my discussion on this current spree of political violence we're experiencing here in America. Many people, myself included, are wondering and speculating on this troubling phenomenon. Perhaps more troubling is the all too familiar finger pointing by the culture warriors within our government institutions and our society in general. Since that's the case, I feel obliged to offer my take on this unfortunate trend. Recently, late night comedian and talk show host Jimmy Kimmel had some comments that led to his suspension for a little while. Comments that, on the face of it, when I first heard it, even to me, they sounded awkward and nonsensical. Basically, he was saying that the young man who was arrested for assassinating Charlie Kirk, that his motivations and his the act itself was indeed created by the supporters of Charlie Kirk, or if you want to say the conservative movement that's going on, or the MAGA movement that's currently, prominent in our American society, culture, and politics. And like I said, it didn't make any sense to me when I first heard it. But given that, Jimmy Kimmel, he's a person that kind of wears his heart on his sleeve. Out of all the late night talk show hosts and people that are involved in satirical content on late night television or television in general, he's very emotional. And I think when he made the comments, and I've seen, Jimmy become emotional during his dialogue at times. And when he does get emotional, his delivery gets a little muddy, a little muddled. And I think what he said kind of fell into that vein, where he just wasn't, it was a little bit inarticulate in what he was trying to convey. And what I think he may have been trying to convey is something very close to my own thought process and perspective on the matter. And basically, that is the advent of the Make America Great Again movement, that populist force that has powered Donald Trump to two successful presidential campaigns, is radicalizing extremists on both sides of the political divide. All the factions of our culture war believe they are fighting to save the soul and heritage of democracy. On one side, you've got traditional family values and trade protectionism, immigration, projection of global power, versus the other side, which is diversity of opinion and opportunity with economic and justice equality for all. Both sides earnestly believe that the stakes are too high to lose, to the point that some mentally disturbed and radicalized individuals are willing to kill or die for causes that have already upended the proper functioning of all branches of our government, all three branches. And that's a troubling prospect. Uh, when you've got a loss of faith and well, that's basically it, a loss of faith in all branches of government. I, I guess, I guess all Americans are troubled by this. I've said my previous episode is that I don't believe we've got a functioning government right now. We lurch from one budget shutdown crisis to the next. Constant finger pointing, name calling. No way for any side of the aisle to even seem like offer uh, compromise. It's just a constant fight, bickering, no consensus can seem to be found. And that in Congress has bled over into our judicial system. The culture war, the culture wars have affected them too. And all of this just feeds that appetite, that need to make a difference in your own side's fight. And so what's happening is this, like I said earlier, the culture wars are getting to the point where each side is just saying, we can't lose this. We're fighting for America. We're fighting for our way of life. But America, in my opinion, the way of life has always been about diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity of ideas. So I kind of lean toward the left on that aspect of it. The other side is kind of saying one side should fit all. Western European culture or the American version of Western European culture should rule, should be prominent. But what made America great and what makes America great, in my opinion, is we have different cultures. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious here, but I don't want to eat meat and potatoes all the time. I don't want to eat Irish stew all the time. I enjoy the spice of Latin cuisine. I enjoy the richness and bold flavors of African American cuisine. All the different uh, styles of barbecue that we have. I mean, that came from American ingenuity, innovation, imagination from all cultures. And you know, it seems like there's an extreme part of the right wants to go back to something that it's just not feasible to do. It just causes discord, causes disputes, and unfortunately, it radicalizes people to the extreme point of political violence. You know, America is no stranger to political violence. We've had four presidents assassinated while they were in office. Abraham Lincoln in 1865, Garfield in 1881, McKinley, 1901, John F. Kennedy in 1963. And we had one sitting president, Reagan, in 1981, was severely wounded and almost died from an assassination attempt. And then we've had two presidents who were running for office had attempts on their life. Most recent was Trump in 2024, but it was also Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. In addition to that, political assassinations like Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King lost their lives to political violence. I just wish that we had, given that history, that would have come or evolved a little bit further in our political discourse, that we would learn lessons from the past to try to, temper the the heat a little bit and avoid these situations where now it is just so easy for people to become radicalized through social media. People who, like I said on a previous podcast, they literally exist in their own echo chamber where they don't see the need or have to listen to any other opinion than the one that they agree with. I was just thinking, right around the time that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there was a young boy, I think he was 13 years old, in Washington State, I believe, who was plotting a mass shooting. I can't remember if it was going to be a school, uh, but I suspect it was. But the social media environment that we in, and with our, this, we live in a country that's just awash in guns. But what struck me about this particular case is that, like I said, 13 years old, he had a cache of guns that was just astounding. I mean, it was like at least a dozen, 13, 14 firearms. All of them were, military style, AR-15 semi-automatic assault rifles, uh, short barreled rifles, all of the rifles, and there was about at least half of the cache of guns were of that type, high capacity magazines, uh, 45 caliber, 9 millimeter handguns, at least 5 or 6 of those. And the first thing, I guess that kind of hit me was 13 years old. I don't know if that was, I can't remember if they were actually his guns or I'm going to assume that, he just had access to that arsenal. But 13 years old. And none of these guns was a hunting gun, a bolt action gun, or a 5, 6 magazine type hunting gun. They were all, for lack of a better word, they were all weapons of war. Like I said, I don't think that the young man's motivation, they was able to, uh, you know, uh, stop what he was planning to do. And what he was planning to do was not political in nature, I don't think. But it was just another instance of how disturbed individuals can become so radicalized by, the motivation to be a copycat, to make a quote unquote mark in the world, to become famous, infamous, to go down as in history as doing something so so unbelievably destructive. So that carries over into what we see with the the political violence that we see. It's just almost too easy for people who don't have access to mental health, uh, therapy, counseling, or just even a place where, like in schools, it's getting to the point now you're almost going to have a mental health counselor in every middle school in America, every high school. It's getting to the point where I think you're going to have to just enroll in middle school and high school. You may have to have mental health evaluation done, in addition to physicals and vaccinations and things like that. I mean, we're heading in that direction. It seems to me, and I don't know. I don't know if that's an answer or if I'm going off on the deep end or not. But the violence that we are seeing in our society, whether it's political or not, it's getting way, way out of hand. And with all this heated rhetoric about literally every issue that comes across our TV screens, our state legislatures, the federal legislature, every issue is so polarizing that I do fear that it's going to cause a breakdown in our society. Civil discourse just seems to be a thing of the starting to seem to be a thing of the past. There's no there's no other way that I can look at it. And I'm sure a lot of people out there feel the same way. I'd like to end on this note. There's a lot of, especially from the Trump administration, Trump himself, he seems to have this feud with just about every uh, late light, late night comedian on television because just about all of them are critical of his policies and they mock him. They their satire is just too much for him to bear a lot of times. But comedy has always been sort of like a pressure relief valve. When you go through trying times, whether it be economic, social, uh, times of war, we've always used comedy to get us through. You know that old adage, laugh to keep from crying. Back during the Depression in the 1930s, there was this guy called Will Rogers during the heyday of radio and when, silent movies and even the so-called quote unquote talkies, he was part of that. And he used to satirize and pick on everybody, politicians, the mafia, uh, even himself. And he was like America's, and nobody bothered him about it. He was able to pick and make fun of, like I said, notorious criminals and the president, and Congress, and he just kind of, he was one of those kind of guys that just kind of brought you through those hard times, made you believe in hope that you could get through this. Because when you can laugh at a problem, it eases that burden, that pressure on your shoulders. It takes a little bit of that stress off your mind. Hell, even before him, uh, Mark Twain kind of did the same thing. Richard Pryor. And so we come into, this age today of social media. Comedy serves that purpose, I think. It keeps us sane when it seems like the world is going crazy all around us. Kind of keeps you rooted, like I said, in faith and hope, so you can kind of ignore reality until you get back on an even keel again. You know, back when I was growing up and I was a young, a younger man, there were some song lyrics that I really, really, they really touched me. And I grew up through the civil rights era and through the Vietnam War and the aforementioned assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. The lyrics of three of my favorite songs, they kind of helped me or guided me through those troubled times. What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, Imagine by John Lennon, and Way of the World by Earth, Wind, and Fire. If you get a chance, listen to those songs and pay attention to the lyrics of those songs. In Way of the World, one part the lyrics go, let me get it right. Child is born with a heart of gold, the ways of the world make that heart grow cold. That is so apropos to what I think we're seeing today. Our humanity, we're losing touch with it. We don't have any time, I guess, for childlike innocence to last throughout our years. We become entrenched in partisanship and ideologies and all this whatnot and crazy crap that we allow to influence our thinking. We're losing our loving hearts. We're losing our peaceful nature. And I just think that it's a shame. I just think it's a shame. Well, like Jimmy Kimmel, I'm getting a little emotional now. Because as much as I want to have hope, as much as I want to see a better future, a brighter future for this country, I'm having a hard time, a real hard time. I hope that that you listeners out there, that you have better luck. Try to stay positive. Try to keep that heart of gold. Believe in your fellow man. Well, that's all I got. So, until next time, be good, be careful, try to love one another.